During World War II, many European cities existed under conditions of strict control, shortages, and constant tension. In one such city located along a major railway axis, the German military administration established an important supply hub. Through this hub passed fuel, food, medical materials, and numerous other goods required for the army. Among these supplies was a simple commodity that attracted almost no attention from the occupying authorities. It was ordinary household soap. The city was divided into controlled sectors. The central sector contained administrative offices, storage facilities, barracks, and guarded zones where patrols moved at all hours. In the industrial districts stood workshops, repair depots, and warehouses containing civilian goods that were supervised by German personnel. Part of the population lived cautiously within the new rules. People received ration cards, followed imposed regulations, and attempted to avoid unwanted notice. Another part of the population participated in underground structures that collected information, provided assistance to those in danger, and distributed printed materials. From the very beginning of the occupation, each flow of goods underwent careful inspection. German units opened sacks of flour, crates with canned products, and barrels filled with fuel. Instructions required continuous checks of all parcels and railway cargo, especially of items destined for frontline formations. Yet every controlled system contains elements that are overlooked. The occupying forces paid less attention to goods considered insignificant. Soap became one such item. No military unit and no civilian group could function without it. And this familiarity made the item seem harmless. A small soap factory operated in the city. Before the war, it supplied local markets and nearby villages. Once the occupation began, the factory was placed under German control. It produced soap according to quotas designated for military units and field hospitals. Inventory lists identified soap as a standard sanitary material. Inspectors focused on quantities and distribution percentages rather than the internal content of each bar. During checks, crates of soap were often approved within seconds. This situation eventually formed the foundation for the later events. Members of the underground paid attention to the differences in control patterns. They observed that food supplies and canned goods underwent strict inspections, with labels checked and contents verified. In contrast, crates filled with bars of soap were opened briefly or not opened at all. Officers confirmed documentation and moved on to more important tasks. The underground network was not a single coordinated center. It consisted of many small groups connected through couriers and secret contacts. The participants included former soldiers, engineers, skilled workers, and students. Their primary mission involved collecting information regarding the movement of German divisions, monitoring supply chains, and offering assistance to those seeking to escape forced labor or arrest. Over time, the question of more active resistance emerged. The railway junction in the city played a critical role in supplying various German units. Military trains with ammunition and equipment passed through it regularly. Any direct attack on these transports was considered unrealistic because of strict security and the likelihood of severe reprisals against the civilian population. Members of the underground searched for a different method to influence the situation by exploiting weaknesses in the supply system. Observations revealed that one of the supply routes included regular deliveries of soap to German formations stationed several dozen kilometers from the city. This cargo was marked as sanitary provisions. It followed an established quota and drew no special interest from guards. Documentation listed the crates, official stamps confirmed their origin, and inspection procedures rarely involved detailed checks of the product. The underground movement included individuals with technical knowledge. Some had experience with engineering and explosives from pre-war service. They understood the risks involved in any operation related to explosive materials, especially within densely populated areas. They also understood that small controlled charges could be used for precise effects without threatening civilian buildings. The idea of using household soap as a means of concealment for compact explosive devices did not appear instantly. It evolved through weeks of observations and careful analysis. Every decision in wartime required an assessment of both potential benefit and possible consequences. Members of the underground realized that such an operation demanded discipline and absolute precision. Soap had a practical shape and structure that made it convenient for concealment. Bars were uniform, compact, and easy to pack in large quantities. The appearance of the product gave no reason for suspicion. The occupying authorities regarded soap as a simple household item that did not require special attention. This perception created a strategic advantage. However, the underground movement could not risk experimentation on a large scale. Any mistake carried the danger of harming civilians. Therefore, they spent significant time studying the daily operations of the soap factory, the system of storage, the shipment schedule, and the positions of guards along the supply route. Gradually, a workable scheme appeared. The factory could become an intermediate point between the underground group and the German military supply chain. Under specific conditions, it became possible to place small concealed charges inside selected batches. These charges were designed not for large destruction, but for disabling equipment or damaging storage areas on arrival. The German administration remained focused on counts of fuel tanks, crates with ammunition, and columns of military vehicles. Boxes of soap did not represent a threat in their understanding. Documents confirmed the shipment. Visual checks verified the harmless appearance of the bars. The expanding workload on the supply system reduced the time available for thorough inspections. The contrast between perception and reality created the opportunity that defined the events which followed. No German official at the time considered the possibility that a household item used daily in barracks, field hospitals, and military kitchens could conceal a threat. Suspicion was directed at people and documents, not at ordinary goods. Thus, the conditions emerged for a method of resistance based on an everyday object. For the German authorities, soap remained a line in a supply ledger and a routine sanitary commodity. For the underground, it gradually became an instrument in a planned operation intended to demonstrate that even the most controlled system contains points vulnerable to oversight. As the occupation intensified, the underground movement focused more closely on the soap factory. Its position within the supply chain made it valuable not because of its size, but because of the predictability of its production cycles. Every week, shipments left the facility along the same route with the same paperwork and escorts. German forces viewed these shipments as routine. This predictability gave the underground a rare opportunity to act within a system that otherwise allowed almost no openings. Before anything could be attempted, the underground group needed accurate knowledge of the factory. They observed how raw materials arrived, how finished bars were cooled and packed, and how guards positioned themselves during routine inspections. They learned which workers continued their duties under German administration and which ones were trusted by the occupying authorities. They also identified a small number of individuals who quietly sympathized with the underground cause and could reliably pass along information. The underground group worked slowly. They avoided sudden changes in behavior, knowing that attention from German patrols could jeopardize everything. They studied the production schedule and learned that the factory worked in batches. Each batch produced hundreds of identical bars, which were placed into wooden crates lined with paper. Crates were stored in a warehouse that was poorly lit and rarely visited by the Germans except during shipment days. The plan required extremely small explosive components. These materials were difficult to obtain. Some were scavenged from unexploded ordnance found on the outskirts of the city. Others came from damaged equipment that German units had abandoned during earlier stages of the war. Individuals with engineering knowledge disassembled the materials, sorted them, and prepared tiny charges that could fit inside altered bars of soap. Each modified bar had to look identical to a regular one. Its shape, texture, and surface had to remain undisturbed. To accomplish this, members of the underground created molds that replicated the factory's standard bar form. They melted real soap, reworked the interior, inserted the compact charge, then sealed the bar using a thin layer of the same mixture. When the soap cooled, the seam became nearly impossible to detect, even under close inspection. In addition to technical precision, the group also needed full understanding of how shipments were documented. They studied paperwork, stamps, and signatures. They obtained copies of discarded forms and analyzed how crates were labeled. They learned which crates were usually selected during quick German inspections. The pattern showed that workers often placed one crate from the top row on a bench for a brief check. Crates buried deeper in the stack rarely drew attention. This pattern became crucial. The underground developed a method to introduce modified bars into specific crates in the middle layers of each shipment. These layers were seldom opened unless a special directive arrived, and no such directive had ever accompanied a soap shipment. Timing became essential. The modified bars were placed only minutes before the crates were sealed and moved toward the loading area. Workers who assisted the underground acted naturally, blending their actions with routine labor. The goal was not destruction of civilian buildings or harm to local residents. The target was German logistics. According to information gathered by the underground, soap shipments were transported to a series of depots where German motor units stored equipment. The charges concealed inside selected bars were designed to detonate only when subjected to specific conditions, such as heat or mechanical pressure inside tool storage areas or vehicle maintenance points. The objective was disruption rather than devastation. During the preparation phase, the underground group operated under continuous threat. German patrols frequently searched industrial zones, and any discovery of suspicious materials could have resulted in immediate executions. The group kept communication to a minimum and avoided gatherings. Instructions were transferred through coded notes hidden inside ordinary household items. Each participant knew only the segment of the operation that was necessary for their role. Weeks of preparation accumulated results. Several test bars had been produced and inspected under lamplight to ensure that no irregularities could be noticed. Members practiced the timing required to place modified bars into crates without arousing suspicion. They adjusted molds, improved sealing methods, and reduced the size of the internal mechanism to its absolute minimum. Finally, the group reached a point where only the execution step remained. The next scheduled shipment was expected within days. The factory did not deviate from its routine. Workers prepared crates for the upcoming quota. German overseers reviewed paperwork mechanically, assuming that nothing unusual could be hidden in such a simple product. The underground group recognized that the window of opportunity would be brief. They understood the risks, but also believed that careful preparation gave them a chance to influence the enemy's supply network without causing harm to civilians. Every detail had been studied. Every possibility for exposure had been considered. When the shipment day arrived, the soap factory appeared outwardly unchanged. Yet within its walls, the final phase of a covert operation was about to begin. The morning of the shipment began like any other working day in the occupied city. The soap factory opened its gates at the usual hour. Workers moved between buildings carrying trays of freshly cooled bars, while German overseers reviewed lists and checked the number of crates prepared for transport. Nothing in the atmosphere suggested that inside several crates lay items created in secret during the previous weeks. The underground group acted cautiously. Only a few individuals were directly involved in placing the modified bars into selected crates. They waited for the moment when the warehouse became busiest, since activity provided cover for brief, precise actions. Stacks of soap crates stood in long rows. Workers sorted them, organized them, and carried them closer to the loading area. In this environment, small movements were difficult to distinguish. Inside one of the dim aisles, the modified bars were added to crates positioned midway in the stacks. These crates were already sealed on two sides. The underground members loosened the remaining nails, inserted the bars, and closed the lid again using the same tools that regular workers used. The crate surfaces looked untouched and showed no marks of tampering. Once the crates were returned to the pile, they blended seamlessly among hundreds of identical boxes. German officers briefly inspected the upper row of crates. They checked documentation, compared quantities, and opened one or two crates near the top. Their attention focused only on ensuring that the shipment matched the quota. After a short inspection, they instructed workers to proceed with loading. The deeper layers, where the modified bars were hidden, remained untouched. Railway workers arrived with a locomotive and a small chain of cargo wagons. The crates were carried out through the rear gate of the factory and moved onto the loading ramp. German guards supervised the process from a distance. Their focus remained on maintaining pace and order. They paid more attention to potential human interference than to the soap itself. The factory noise and the movement of workers created an impression of normalcy. Within this environment, the shipment rolled toward the railway junction without raising any suspicion. Once the crates were inside the wagon, the doors were closed and locked. A guard placed an official seal on the latch. This seal served only to ensure that the wagon remained unopened during travel. It did not indicate any concern regarding the contents. At the junction, the wagon with the soap crates was attached to a larger supply train. The train was scheduled to deliver fuel, small mechanical parts, and maintenance supplies to several German depots. Soap was classified as part of the sanitary allotment and therefore included in the same transport category. Railway personnel completed the paperwork, and the train began its journey along a route that had hardly changed during the previous months. For the underground members, the departure marked the completion of the most dangerous phase. They understood that the fate of the shipment was now beyond their control. No one among them expected immediate effects. The charges were designed to activate under specific conditions that would occur later once the crates reached German storage areas. The purpose was to disrupt equipment readiness and create complications within repair workshops and garages. The journey of the supply train continued through several stations. The wagon with the soap crates attracted no special attention. At each stop, guards checked the seals on the doors to ensure that no one attempted to enter the wagon. They recorded temperatures, schedules, and delays. Soap remained for them an unremarkable cargo. As the train approached the first depot, German personnel prepared to unload the sanitary supplies. They expected a routine delivery. These depots contained vehicle repair bays, storage halls for spare parts, and rows of workbenches where mechanics maintained transport units. Soap was frequently used by maintenance crews and thus stored near equipment racks, fuel cans, and mechanical tools. The crates from the train were placed inside a storage building along with other items from the shipment. Workers arranged them by weight and type, preparing to distribute them later to repair teams. The crates looked completely ordinary. No one noticed that several of them contained altered bars instead of regular soap. Hours passed. Mechanics began their daily tasks. They collected tools and arranged equipment. During these routine operations, the environment inside the storage halls included heat, pressure, and friction from machinery. These conditions were exactly those that the underground group had anticipated during the planning stage. The first effects did not appear immediately. The depot remained busy and noisy in its usual manner. Engines were tested. Metal clattered against concrete floors. The modified crates stood among many others. Only later would the consequences of the operation become visible. No one inside the depot had any idea that among the harmless-looking supplies lay carefully hidden devices placed there weeks earlier in a small factory that had seemed irrelevant to German authorities. The train that had delivered the shipment continued onward to other stops. The routine of supply transport resumed quickly, as if nothing unusual had occurred. The underground movement within the city received no information about the results and did not expect any for some time. Their part in the operation had ended, Yet the full impact of their actions had only just begun to unfold in the distant locations where German forces relied on seemingly simple and safe materials. At the German depot, routine activity continued without interruption. Workers opened crates, distributed supplies, repaired vehicles, and monitored fuel storage. No one viewed the shipment of soap as anything more than a standard delivery for maintenance teams. The crates were placed near tool racks, and mechanics began using the supplies with the same indifference that had allowed them to pass through inspections in the occupied city. The first signs of irregularity appeared hours later. A loud impact echoed across one of the storage halls, followed by the sound of metal collapsing onto concrete. Workers initially assumed that a tool cabinet had fallen. When guards investigated the source, they found a damaged equipment rack and scorch marks spreading across the wall behind it. The pattern of the marks was small and focused. Nothing indicated large sabotage. Yet the incident seemed unusual enough for officers to question the workers, who had no explanation. During the same afternoon, a similar incident occurred in another building. This time, several fuel containers were damaged. The damage remained localized, but forced the unit to halt all activity inside the hall for inspection. Reports were drafted and forwarded to higher command, though most officers assumed that careless handling of supplies was the cause. As the day progressed and incidents increased, confusion spread among depot personnel. Mechanics spoke quietly among themselves, unable to understand why ordinary storage areas were generating scattered disturbances. In many cases, equipment had been left untouched for hours before the damage appeared. This suggested delayed activation, something that officers struggled to classify. When technical specialists arrived from a nearby command post, they began examining the damaged areas. They found fragments of unfamiliar material and traces of chemical residue that did not match any item listed in the storage logs. Investigators opened several crates connected to the shipment. Most contained normal soap bars. Only within deeper layers of specific crates did they find bars with irregular density and faint traces of internal components. The realization grew slowly, as the idea seemed implausible to the investigators. Eventually, they concluded that the soap itself contained concealed devices. The discovery caused significant disruption. Security officers rechecked workers, sealed entire buildings, and ordered full inspection of every remaining crate in the depot. They struggled to determine how the altered items had reached the facility. Records showed no breaches in the transport line. The shipment had been sealed properly. The factory in the occupied city had been inspected regularly. This lack of clarity created frustration among German officers who could not identify where the sabotage had entered the supply chain. The incidents produced more than material damage. They created hesitation within the logistics network. For the first time in months, German units questioned the reliability of everyday supplies. Additional inspections were ordered across several rail routes. Storage procedures were revised. Even small items, such as soap, were added to lists requiring extended checks. These changes slowed the movement of goods and affected operational readiness. Meanwhile, clues about the events slowly reached the underground in the occupied city through indirect channels. Reports circulating among civilians mentioned disturbances in several German depots. The underground members realized that their operation had reached its targets. They also understood that the Germans would likely increase security and attempt to trace the source. For this reason, the group reduced activity and avoided any contact with the factory. Their goal had never been to provoke wide retaliation, but to demonstrate that logistical systems could be disrupted through methods that the enemy did not expect. Weeks later, the German authorities conducted a full investigation of the soap factory. They interviewed workers, searched storage rooms, and inspected equipment. They found no direct evidence linking the altered bars to anyone in the factory. The underground had operated with caution and had left no traceable materials. German officers eventually concluded that the sabotage had been prepared far earlier, before the soap ever reached their inspection points. The lack of clear answers frustrated them and forced them to accept that an apparently harmless commodity had become a tool of resistance. As time passed, the events at the depot became part of a broader pattern of minor logistical failures that affected German units in the region. Some failures were caused by resistance. Others resulted from shortages, rushing, and the strain of prolonged war. In this environment, the idea that soap had been used to carry hidden charges remained difficult for German officers to accept. They viewed the item as too ordinary and too insignificant to conceal any threat. For the underground, the operation stood as proof that creativity and precision could influence a system that appeared impenetrable. Their action did not aim to destroy large installations. Its effect came from delaying repairs, forcing inspections, and undermining confidence within the occupying forces. It showed that even small interventions could create uncertainty at a time when logistical stability was crucial. In the city, life continued under occupation. The factory resumed its normal production rhythms. German patrols became more vigilant. Yet, despite increased control, the memory of the operation remained within the underground network as an example of how ordinary materials could carry unexpected potential. The Germans never fully reconstructed the sequence of events. Reports remained inconclusive. Investigators could not agree on how such a simple item had been used against them. They recorded the incidents, filed the summaries, and moved on as the war created new pressures elsewhere. The idea that soap had concealed the instruments of sabotage remained for them an unlikely and unsettling interpretation. For the underground, the operation became part of their local history, a quiet demonstration of resourcefulness inside a city overshadowed by occupation. It proved that the smallest overlooked detail inside a tightly controlled environment could be used to challenge a stronger force. The story circulated quietly for years, remembered by those who had witnessed the occupation and later included in accounts describing how resistance movements employed unorthodox methods to influence events that shaped their future.